My name is Leah Owens, 31 years old. I used to think relationships ended with shouting with slammed doors and broken glass. Turns out sometimes they end with a quiet laugh, the kind that isn't meant for you. It started on an ordinary Tuesday. Not a stormy one, not one of those movie days where the world hints at tragedy. Just a clean, sunlit afternoon that smelled of fresh coffee and deadlines. Sam sat on the couch phone, tilted toward his grin light, pooling across his cheekbones. I hadn't seen him smile like that in weeks. Marissa just sent me the funniest meme, he said, chuckling. It's exactly how I feel creative burnout artists on caffeine IV drips. She gets it. I looked up from my sketch pad. She sent me that too. He didn't even look up. Oh, really? Well, it hits different when it's about your own work. The words were casual, but they stung. A thin, invisible cut, nothing fatal yet. Just a hairline fracture. Marissa. The name had been in our conversations long before the fracture. She was Sam's best friend since high school, the golden girl with the easy laugh and the social media sparkle. The one who always commented my favorite genius under his posts. At first I didn't mind. Every artist has their muse, right? But lately she'd stopped being background noise. She'd become the melody. That night, as Sam scrolled through her messages, I studied the reflection of blue light flickering over his face. It was like watching someone fall in love in a mirror, except the reflection wasn't of me anymore. 3 months earlier, on Sam's birthday, I tried to remind him of us. I spent weeks planning at dinner at his favorite hole-in-the-wall bistro, the indie concert he'd raved about. Nothing flashy, just us. Then at 10 a.m. that morning, a courier arrived. A massive bouquet of exotic orchids and lilies, Marissa's signature style, along with a handwritten card. For the most inspiring man I know, keep creating magic. M. The flowers drowned the room in perfume. By evening, he'd already posted photos of them, tagged her, captioned, "She always believes in me." The dinner I'd planned. He showed up late, distracted, checking his phone between courses. I watched him grin at his screen while I talked about the concert. It wasn't jealousy that bloomed inside me that night. It was recognition. Recognition that someone else now held the map to his joy. Weeks passed. We'd slipped into that silent domestic choreography couples learn after too many small disappointments. I washed the dishes. He worked on his portfolio website. One night he sighed dramatically. "This thing looks awful. I need a total overhaul." "I can help," I said. "I build websites all the time for clients." He waved his hand dismissively, not even looking up. "Nah, it's fine." Marissa offered to redo it for me. She said it's the least she can do to support my creative journey. My grip on the sponge tightened. "Your creative journey?" He smirked, half mocking himself. Her words, not mine. "But she has a real eye for design. It'll be amazing." That was the moment, the pebble before the avalanche. I put down the plate, my voice steady. "Sam, we need to talk about Marissa." He finally looked up, his expression, a mix of confusion and annoyance. "What about her? She's always here, if not physically, then in your pocket. It feels like there are 3 of us in this relationship." He rolled his eyes. "Oh, come on, Leah. Don't be that woman." "What woman?" "The insecure one. Marissa's my best friend. She's harmless. Why are you so threatened by her?" The word threatened hit me like a slap. My worry was rebranded as weakness. My clarity turned into hysteria. And the worst part, he believed his own narrative. I could have listed every micro-betrayal, every late-night call, every secret smile. But I saw it in his face. Nothing I said would reach him. The lamp was lit, and I was the one being told the light didn't exist. So I nodded. "You're right. She's harmless." I turned back to the sink. The water ran hot, hissing. The silence between us stretched heavy as lead. In that silence, something inside me cracked, not loudly, not visibly, but decisively. The fracture was no longer hairline. It was a canyon forming in real time. On one side stood me, clutching the remnants of logic. On the other stood Sam, already reaching for her hand. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I counted each inhale, each exhale like tally marks for something I was about to lose. People think heartbreak arrives all at once like a crash. But it doesn't. It seeps in like water through concrete, slow and patient, until one day the foundation caves in. I turned my head toward him. He was asleep, smiling faintly, his phone clutched in his hand. Even in dreams, he held her. And that's when I knew something irreversible had begun. I didn't know it yet, I whisper now, years later. But the woman helping him build his dream website was already designing the blueprint for our collapse. The following Thursday felt like a reset button. The air was clean, bright, and hopeful, the kind of morning that tricks you into believing the universe still plays fair. Sam had been traveling all week for a freelance shoot. I'd texted him good luck, got a half-hearted thumbs-up emoji in return, and told myself he was just busy. I even started missing him, his messy humor, his absent-minded humming while editing photos at 2 a.m. When my team wrapped our campaign a day early, I thought it was fate giving me one small win. I'd surprise him. I'd show up with his favorite pad thai, the jasmine kind, with extra chili, and maybe we'd talk like we used to. I grabbed flowers from the corner stall, still believing in simple gestures, believing he'd see me again. It was dusk when I reached our building. The sky was a watercolor of gold and violets, soft and harmless. Then my eyes landed on the car. A silver Mini Cooper, spotless, parked directly under our window. The one Marissa loved bragging about buying, with her own art commissions. The pad thai bag grew heavier in my hand. The flowers suddenly smelled too sweet. I told myself she could just be dropping something off. Maybe she was helping him pack gear. Maybe. The mind is a factory of excuses when the heart is desperate for denial. I climbed the 3 flights of stairs in slow motion. The hallway light flickered like a bad omen. I heard laughter. 2 voices, the kind that overlap from familiarity, not distance. My key trembled in the lock. When the door opened, the world didn't explode. It simply shifted 1 inch to the left, just enough to make everything wrong. 2 wine glasses on the coffee table, one with lipstick. Takeout boxes, sushi, not Thai. The expensive place Marissa worshipped. And there they were. Sam cross-legged on the couch, his body tilted toward her. Marissa, barefoot, knees tucked under, wearing one of his shirts like it belonged to her. They weren't touching. They didn't need to. The intimacy was already thick enough to choke on. For a second, none of us spoke. Sam's eyes widened, with that mix of guilt and irritation that only appears when someone's caught but still believes you're the problem. "Leah," he breathed. Voice sharp. "What are you doing here?" I set the food down gently. Finished early. Marissa straightened, smoothing invisible wrinkles on her shorts. "Oh, we were just working on his new portfolio. Didn't expect you back yet." Her tone was light, but her face had that faint, triumphant flush, the kind that said, "I've already won." I didn't answer. My gaze flicked to the car outside. Funny. It's been parked there since last night. Mrs. Krantz from 2B waters her plants at 7 sharp. She mentioned it. Marissa's smile faltered. Sam shifted, caught between lying and surrendering. He chose the easier sin. "Okay," he sighed. "You know what? It just happened. We didn't plan this." The pad thai scent turned sour in the air. I remember the exact look on his face, part apology, part relief. Like confessing freed him from the guilt of pretending. "She understands me, Leah," he said, his tone too soft, almost patronizing. You're steady, predictable. That's not a bad thing. You kept me grounded. But she gets me." The words blurred, steady, predictable. I realized he was describing reliability like it was a flaw. Marissa didn't flinch. She rested a hand on his knee, claiming her prize. "It was inevitable," she said. "We've always had a connection. We just never acted on it until now." Until now, as if that made it noble. I should have screamed, thrown something, demanded an explanation that wouldn't change the ending. Instead, I just stared at them. The 2 people I'd trusted most, sitting side by side like a painting of betrayal. My voice came out quiet, detached, almost clinical. "So all those nights you told me she was like a sister." Sam's jaw twitched. I meant it then. "But feelings evolve," Marissa added quickly. "You can't hold that against him." Evolve. A word that made destruction sound like growth. He stood then, stepping closer, lowering his voice, as if comforting a child. "Look, Leah, she's a nice girl who finally got the guy. You should be happy for us. Really. You'll see this is better for everyone." A pulse of silence followed. I heard the hum of the fridge, the buzz of a fly trapped near the window. My fingers felt numb. The flowers slipped from my hand petals, scattering like confetti for their coronation. I met his gaze and whispered almost to myself, "You actually rehearsed that line, didn't you?" He blinked, confused. I smiled, not kindly, not bitterly, just finished. No need to explain. The show's over. I walked past them, grabbed my coat, and paused by the doorway. Marissa looked up, expecting drama, maybe a slap, maybe tears. Instead, I gave her a small nod. "Congratulations. You finally got your spotlight." Then I turned to Sam, my voice steady as marble. "I hope she keeps you inspired, because you just lost the only person who kept you honest." And I left. No door slam, no scene. Just the soft click of the lock behind me, the sound of something breaking cleanly beyond repair. Outside, the air hit my face cold and sharp. The world hadn't noticed a thing. Cars kept moving. The sky kept dimming. Somewhere someone laughed. I stood there barefoot on the pavement, the scent of spilled jasmine rice in my hair, and realized something terrifyingly freeing. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel grief. Just silence, pure and hollow, stretching like an ocean. That night, I learned silence could be louder than any scream. I didn't pack that night. I didn't cry or rage or text him paragraphs he wouldn't read. I just sat on the edge of my bed, our bed, and stared at the framed photo on the dresser. The two of us laughing under a streetlight, arms tangled, eyes bright. It looked like proof of a happiness that might never have been real. By morning, I had a plan. Not an emotional one, a practical one. Pain can't argue with logistics. Step 1. Get the spare key from the building manager. Step 2. Buy boxes. Step 3. Leave when he's not home. I moved through the day like a ghost performing chores it used to care about. The super grumbled about making me a copy of the key, but I smiled politely, said it was for a lost set. At the U-Haul store, I chose the smallest boxes they had, not because I didn't have much, but because I wanted to lift them myself. No help, no witnesses. Tuesday, 9:12 a.m. I knew Sam and Marissa had a long shoot planned across town. I slipped into the apartment. The lock clicked open like a sigh. The air inside was stale, still scented with wine and betrayal. 2 glasses still sat on the table untouched since that night. The sushi containers in the trash had turned sour. The flowers I brought brown and wilted drooped in the sink. I walked past everything without looking too long. The body remembers before the mind does. If you linger, it hurts. I packed methodically. My clothes, my sketchbooks, my laptop, the old vinyls I collected with my dad, the kitchen knives he gave me when I first moved out, still sharp, still mine. I left everything that was ours, the couch, the TV, the ugly vase his mother adored, even the bed. I didn't want a single thing that smelled like shared air. Each box sealed was a heartbeat slowing down. Each strip of tape a new layer of distance. By noon, the room was bare enough to echo. I found one of Marissa's earrings near the sink, small silver shaped like a teardrop. I held it for a second long enough to feel the irony, then placed it gently on the counter beside my key. A quiet offering to the ghosts they'd made together. I stood in the doorway and whispered to no one. Take it all. The memories, the noise, the half-finished love. I'm done feeding it. Then I closed the door behind me. Erica's spare room was small, half storage, half sanctuary. The air mattress hissed under me that night, the sound weirdly comforting. Silence wrapped around me, heavy but clean. No music, no notifications, no passive-aggressive sighs from the couch. For the first time in months, I could hear my own breathing. I didn't sleep much. I just watched the light crawl up the wall as dawn came and replayed the scene over and over. Sam's expression, the words, Marissa's self-satisfied smile. It was like watching a movie I'd already survived. Grief didn't arrive like a storm. It came in waves of numb practicality. I started making lists. Lists made sense. Lists gave shape to chaos. Call the landlord. Change mailing address. Block numbers. Don't explain anything to anyone. By evening, I'd done it all. The last click of the block button felt like cutting the final wire of an explosive that had already gone off. Days blurred. Erica checked in, but didn't pry. She offered wine company space, the trinity of friendship. I took space. Work filled the hours. Gym filled the rest. Each repetition, each line of code, each step on the treadmill was a small defiance proof that my life could function without the sound of his voice. I ran into mutual friends at a cafe once. They asked how I was. Good, I said, smiling the way people do when they've learned that words are currency too valuable to waste. They looked at each other, unsure. We heard you and Sam. Ended, I said simply. We just ended. That word ended became a spell. Simple, neutral, unbreakable. At night, I'd lie awake and replay his last words. She's a nice girl who finally got the guy. You should be happy for us. The absurdity of it made me laugh, once quietly in the dark. Not the bitter kind of laugh, more like disbelief stretched thin until it snapped. It hit me then I wasn't the victim in his story. I was the lesson. The reminder that love built on borrowed honesty always collapses. A week later, I went back to the apartment complex one last time. Not inside, just to stand across the street. Through the window, I saw Marissa pacing, phone in hand, voice raised. Sam stood near the balcony, motionless. The sight didn't hurt the way I thought it would. It didn't even sting. It just confirmed something I'd already known in my bones, that I'd left at the perfect time. When I returned to Erica's, I made tea and sat on the floor with my sketchbook. No drawings yet, just blank pages. The silence wasn't empty anymore, it was patient, waiting for me to fill it with something that belonged only to me. That night, I finally slept dreamless, steady whole. When I shut that door, I didn't just leave him. I left the woman who waited to be chosen. 3 weeks later, my phone buzzed with a message from Jess, a mutual friend I hadn't heard from since the breakup. "Hey, Leah, you okay? Haven't seen you around. Sam's been quiet lately, weirdly quiet." I stared at the text for a long moment. I didn't know what she'd heard the official story, probably. That I'd been insecure, that I couldn't handle Sam's deep friendship with Marissa. I typed back simply, "I'm good, Jess. Just needed some space. Hope he's doing well." Her reply came fast, nervous. "I don't think he is." Marissa's intense. She showed up to his shoot and argued with a client because the model touched his arm. He looked so embarrassed. It's like she's everywhere. I set my phone down and exhaled. A slow, cold clarity spread through me. Karma isn't thunder. It doesn't arrive dramatic and cinematic. It's quiet, patient, surgical. It starts small, like Marissa insisting on being part of every creative decision. Then she begins checking his phone. Then she starts editing his emails to make him sound more professional. At first, friends think it's cute. She's protective, she's invested, but soon they start noticing how he doesn't laugh as freely, how he looks over his shoulder before speaking. The nice girl who finally got the guy is now guarding him like a trophy that might run away. Rumors trickled to me through the usual cracks. Erica mentioned that her coworker's cousin worked on a campaign with Sam. Apparently, Marissa showed up at the studio and stayed the entire 8-hour day, scrolling through his texts whenever he left the room. "She's just around," Erica said cautiously, "like a shadow that doesn't know when to disappear." I shrugged. Some people mistake possession for partnership, but inside I felt something heavier than satisfaction. It was pity. I didn't check his social media for weeks, not because I was disciplined, but because I was indifferent. When I finally looked, I saw the difference immediately. The bright photos, the jokes, the hashtag creative couple tags, all gone. In their place were polished, hollow shots of products and landscapes. Even his captions sounded muted, as if someone else wrote them. The comments section was filled with half-concerned questions. "Where's Marissa? You guys okay? You've gone quiet." He never replied. Jess texted again 2 days later. Marissa canceled his birthday dinner, said she doesn't like his friends. Apparently they had a fight because he followed a female photographer on Instagram. I didn't answer this time. I didn't need to. I made tea instead. Chamomile. Calm. Peaceful. Free. As I stirred the cup, I realized how strange it felt to know that I didn't want him back, not even a little, because the version of him I loved never really existed. He was a man who needed an audience, not a partner. And Marissa? She was just a mirror that flattered him until the reflection started to rot. Weeks passed. Life slipped back into rhythm. Work, gym, sketching, silence. The silence that used to sting now soothed me. Then one night, while washing dishes, I caught myself humming. A song from the concert we'd missed that night months ago, the one I'd planned for his birthday. The memory didn't hurt anymore. It was just a detail from another life. But the universe wasn't done with irony yet. At the cafe near my office, I overheard 2 women talking. One of them was a stylist who sometimes worked with Sam's agency. Marissa freaked out again, she whispered. Yelled at him in front of everyone because he smiled at a model. He looked like he wanted to disappear. The other woman gasped. Didn't they move in together? They did, and now she checks his phone bill every day, literally tracks his location. It's bad. They laughed nervously, not realizing their words hit me like a ghostly echo of my past. That night, I wrote in my journal for the first time in months. June 9th. I used to think betrayal deserved revenge, but watching them destroy each other quietly feels more like justice than anything I could have planned. Maybe the real punishment isn't losing someone, it's realizing you chose wrong, and no one's coming to save you. I closed the book, sat in silence, let that truth settle deep. It was strange the way life balances its scales without my help. I didn't need to expose them, didn't need to curse their names. All I had to do was leave, and the world did the rest. A week later, I walked past our old building. Marissa's car was still parked in the same spot. I saw her through the window, pacing phone pressed to her ear, gesturing wildly. Sam sat on the couch, head in hands, motionless. I watched for less than a minute. Then I turned away. Because for the first time in months, I realized the difference between us. I had left the cage. and she had built hers. He left me for someone who worshipped him until the worship turned into surveillance. It started quietly. A message from an unfamiliar number on a Saturday morning while I was folding laundry, sunlight streaming through the blinds. Unknown Leah, it's me. I think I made a huge mistake. Can we talk? The words looked small on the screen, almost harmless, like a child's apology scribbled on a napkin. I stared at them for a long moment, felt my pulse steady, and then did the only thing that still felt sacred. Delete, block, no hesitation, no response. I'd already buried that version of myself, the woman who would have replied with softness, who would have been drawn back by guilt, disguised as closure. Not this time. A week passed. Then came the second attempt, a call from his mother of all people. I almost didn't answer, but old habits die slow, and curiosity can sound a lot like compassion when it knocks softly enough. Leah, honey. Her voice was gentle, the kind mothers use when they're about to hand you their son's mess, wrapped in concern. Oh, Leah, it's awful. Sam's miserable. That girl Marissa, she's a controlling little monster. She monitors his phone, yells at him in public, even told him to quit a job because there were female clients involved. Can you imagine? I stayed silent. Let her fill the air. He cries, Leah. He's broken. You know how fragile he can be. You were always the one who calmed him down. Please, talk to him. He listens to you. There it was, the old script. My assigned role, the caretaker, the emotional janitor, the stabilizer. I took a breath, steady and even. Mrs. Dalton, I said softly, I'm sorry he's going through that. It sounds very difficult. Oh, it is, she rushed in, hopeful. But his choices are his own. Silence on the line, the kind that thunders. What do you mean, she whispered, as if I'd spoken in another language. I can't help him, and I won't. She gasped, scandalized, as though refusing to bleed for someone was cruelty. Leah, please don't be cold. I'm not being cold, I said. I'm being finished. Then I hung up, and blocked her too. The third attempt came days later, long after midnight. My phone buzzed against the nightstand, another unknown number. This time I answered. A choked sob cracked through the line. Leah Sam's voice. Unsteady, wet with alcohol and desperation. I said nothing. Why are you doing this to me? His voice trembled, teetering between grief and accusation. Do you know what she's like? She doesn't let me breathe. She checks my location, my messages, everything. She says it's because she loves me too much. But it's hell, Leah. His breath hitched. The victim act was rehearsed, the tone too polished to be raw. Please, just talk to me. You always knew how to calm me down. Still, I said nothing. Then the plea turned sharp. How can you be so cruel? I said I was sorry. Isn't that enough? He waited for mercy. I gave him silence. The anger flared. You're just as cold as she is. You think you're better than me? You're both the same, manipulative, heartless. He stopped himself panting, realizing his words were dissolving into the same poison that had destroyed him. I let the silence stretch until he broke it with a bitter laugh. Are you happy now I'm suffering, and you're just what? Reading your little books, pretending you're over it. He wanted a reaction, a spark, proof that he still existed somewhere inside me. But I had nothing left to give. Not anger, not pity, not love. Finally, he exhaled a curse, his voice breaking into static. Then the line went dead. I sat there for a long moment staring at the dark ceiling. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying. I just felt the quiet return, that sacred, still quiet I'd built piece by piece. For the first time, I understood he wasn't calling for forgiveness. He was calling for relevance. And my silence was proof that he no longer had any. The next morning, I made coffee and watered my plants. The small things. The rituals that make ordinary life holy again. Erica peeked out of her room. You okay? Yeah, I said simply. And I meant it. Weeks passed before the fourth and final attempt arrived, this time in my inbox. An email from a scrambled address SD, remember, @gmail.com. Subject line blank. I almost deleted it on instinct. But something in me, maybe the historian, maybe the ghost of who I'd been, wanted to read the last page of the story before closing the book for good. The message was long, rambling, unpunctuated, words pouring out like someone had finally cut open the pipe. Leah. I don't know if you'll get this. She checks everything. My phone, my emails, my social media. This is the only way I can reach you. I can't do this anymore. She isn't who I thought she was. She screams, throws things. I can't even sleep. I miss you. I think about you every day. You were the only one who ever understood me. You made me feel safe. You never judged me. You never yelled. You made me better. I was so stupid. Please, Leah, I need you to save me. I can't breathe here. No apology, no ownership, just desperation disguised as affection. The old me would have taken the bait, the fixer, the nurturer, the woman who could always see the wounded child under the man's mistakes. But the woman reading this now knew better. I didn't see a man seeking redemption. I saw one looking for rescue. I leaned back in my chair, eyes tracing the sunlight across the floor, and I realized something important. He wasn't asking to come home. He was asking me to lose mine. That night I drafted a reply calm, precise, and final. Not for him, but for closure, for me. To sdremember@gmail.com. Subject Re-Sam. I received your email. I'm sorry you're in a difficult situation, but it's one you chose with full awareness. You once told me I should be happy for you both because she's a nice girl who finally got the guy. You said she deserved to be happy. I hope she is. You were right about one thing. My role in your story is over. My peace is not negotiable, and it does not include reopening a door I closed for good. Do not contact me again. I read it once. No venom, no tenderness, just truth. Then I hit send. The silence that followed was absolute, not empty, not aching, but whole. And for the first time, I felt something deeper than revenge, deeper than closure. Freedom. The boy who needed saving still believed the world owed him a lifeguard, but I was done drowning on purpose. The moment I hit send, the cursor blinked at the edge of the screen like a heartbeat fading into stillness. No fanfare, no explosion, just quiet. A clean, unremarkable silence that marked the end of everything. I closed the laptop and exhaled. The city outside hummed with ordinary life cars, honking children, laughing in the park below, sounds that had kept moving while my world paused months ago. And just like that, it all began to unfreeze. The next morning, I woke before sunrise, made coffee, opened the curtains. The sky was pale, soft pink, bleeding into gold, a color I hadn't noticed in months. For the first time since everything fell apart, I didn't check my phone immediately. No messages, no missed calls, no emergencies demanding my empathy. It was blissfully, beautifully still. Days passed, then weeks. No replies, no new unknown numbers. The silence that once frightened me now felt like protection. Sometimes I'd think of the email I sent, how final it sounded, how unlike me it was to end something without softening the blow. But then I'd remember all the times I'd softened things for others and shattered myself in the process. There was nothing cruel about boundaries. They were simply fences around the garden I was learning to grow again. One night as rain slid down the windows, I thought of the line I'd written to him. My peace is not negotiable. It sounded bold when I typed it, but sitting there watching the droplets chase each other down the glass, I realized it was more than a declaration. It was a vow. Peace wasn't something I'd found. It was something I'd built, brick by brick, decision by decision. And part of that construction was learning that not every cry for help deserves an answer, especially when it comes from the person who set the fire. A few weeks later, Jess texted again. He's gone off grid, deleted everything. Marissa's posting weird quotes about love as captivity. Everyone's worried. I didn't reply, not out of malice, just absence of interest. They weren't my story anymore. Their chaos was the background noise of a movie I'd already walked out of. At work, my creative spark came back like a slow dawn. Colors felt vibrant again. My ideas weren't tinged with exhaustion or over-explanation. I stopped overthinking how people perceived me. One of my colleagues noticed and smiled. "You seem lighter," she said. I laughed. Maybe I finally put something heavy down. A month later, a package arrived at Erica's apartment. No return address. Inside was a small cardboard box wrapped in brown paper. I froze for a moment before opening it, but inside wasn't what I expected. My old sketchbook, the one I'd left behind in the apartment. No note, no message, just that. I flipped through the pages, my early drawings, half-finished concepts, doodles from nights when I'd waited for Sam to come home. It smelled faintly like his cologne, faintly like memory. I closed it gently, placed it in a drawer, and whispered to the air, "Thank you for returning what's mine. Keep the rest." That night I painted. For the first time in years, the brush didn't hesitate. The colors moved on their own, deep blues, fractured whites, streaks of orange light. It didn't mean anything. It didn't need to. When I finished, I stepped back and saw something unintentional, but perfect, a horizon line, splitting storm from calm. Two worlds, one I left behind, one I was finally learning to live in. Sometimes closure doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive wrapped in justice or apology. It shows up quietly in the way your heartbeat doesn't spike when their name appears, or how their memory passes through you like wind through an open door. That night I slept deeply for the first time since all of it began. And in the stillness before morning, I realized something simple and absolute. I wasn't waiting for an ending anymore. I was already living in the after. When people ask me now what happened between us, I tell them the truth. But in a single line, he mistook control for love, and I mistook silence for peace. We both learned the difference too late. And then I smile, not bitterly, but softly, because it's not a wound anymore. It's just a scar, faint and familiar proof that healing once had to happen there. Weeks later, I received one last text from Jess. He moved away. She stayed behind. No one's seen him since. I thought you'd want to know. I stared at the message, waiting for that old ache to return. It didn't. I typed back only 2 words. Wish them peace. Then I set the phone face down and watched the city lights blink in the distance, like quiet affirmations that life somehow keeps moving. The past wasn't a ghost anymore. It was a story, one that had finally stopped asking to be rewritten. I do not wish you harm, but I am entirely indifferent to your happiness. That was the truest thing I'd ever said, and the most freeing. The silence in my life wasn't empty anymore. It was a presence, and it was entirely my own. It's strange how peace sneaks up on you. One day you realize the absence of chaos no longer feels foreign, it feels earned. The world becomes quieter, not because it has changed, but because you have. That was me, 6 months after the email. By then, Erica's spare room had turned from refuge into home. The air mattress was replaced by a real bed. My boxes had been unpacked, their contents folded neatly into drawers, not reminders of loss, but of survival. Every corner of the room carried my fingerprints now, my scent, my life. And every morning began with the same ritual: coffee, sunlight, and silence. The kind of silence that doesn't ache, it breathes. Work had taken a turn too. My art director noticed the change before I did. "You've been sharper lately," she said. "More alive." I smiled. Maybe I just stopped bleeding into the wrong places. We both laughed, but I meant it. My creativity had stopped revolving around fixing people. It began revolving around expression, messy, raw, imperfect expression. I started painting again, not for clients or commissions, but for myself. Every brush stroke felt like reclaiming oxygen. One night, Erica and I went out for drinks. She'd insisted, "You've been hermiting for months. You need to meet actual humans again." So I did, and there at a small jazz bar tucked into an old brick alley, I met Evan. He wasn't flashy. He didn't perform charm like a magic trick. He listened, really listened, the kind of listening that doesn't wait for its turn to speak. When he asked about my art, I told him I paint when I'm happy and when I'm healing. Lately, it's been both. He grinned. "That's a good mix." And somehow it was. We started meeting on Thursdays. No expectations, no labels. Just 2 people who didn't need to fill silence with explanations. He'd walk me home sometimes, holding my hand, sometimes not, as if the choice itself was the connection. One night, while sitting by the river, he asked gently, "What happened before we met?" I thought about how to answer. How do you summarize years of heartbreak, silence, and rediscovery into a sentence that won't sound tragic? So I said the only thing that mattered: I stopped mistaking love for obligation. He nodded, not asking for more. That was the moment I knew he wasn't another test, he was a sign that I'd already passed. A few weeks later, I moved into a small studio apartment, bright, full of light plants everywhere. The first thing I hung on the wall was that painting I'd made months ago, the horizon split between storm and calm. It looked different now. Back then it had felt like separation. Now it looked like balance. I stood there, coffee in hand, and whispered to the brushstrokes, "You were the first thing I created after losing everything. You saved me before I even knew I needed saving." Every once in a while, I still think about Sam and Marissa, not with anger, not even pity, just curiosity, like remembering a movie I once watched but can't recall the ending of. Do they still live in that apartment? Do they still argue in circles, calling it love? Maybe, maybe not. Either way, it's not my story anymore. And that's the most peaceful feeling of all, realizing not every ghost deserves an epilogue. Months later, one of my paintings was accepted into a local gallery show. The theme was resilience. When they asked for the piece's title, I hesitated. Then I wrote it down in steady, deliberate ink, "The Quiet That Stayed." At the exhibition, people stood before it, tilting their heads, whispering. A woman asked, "What's it about?" I smiled. "It's about silence, the kind that doesn't mean emptiness, the kind that means freedom." After the show, I went home, took off my shoes, and stood by the window. The city lights flickered below the same way they had the night I'd sent that final email. Except this time they didn't feel like reminders of something lost, they felt like stars I could reach. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat at my desk where a new sketchbook lay open. The first page was blank, not empty, just waiting. I picked up my pencil and wrote across the top, "Love isn't about who stays. It's about who you become after they leave." Then I began to draw not him, not her, not the past, but the woman who survived it all. Her eyes calm, her hands steady, her silence alive. And when I finished, I whispered to her reflection in the window. And for the first time, the story is mine.